She, the wounded Apache woman, promised children to the cowboy set to kill her. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The wind whispered across the dry earth, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. Somewhere in this vast, harsh land, a woman struggled to stand. Her body was weak, her breath shallow and ragged. She was a wounded Apache woman, alone, and every step she took felt heavier than the last. The marks of a recent battle covered her skin, bruises and cuts telling stories of pain and survival. Her clothes were torn, and the blood that had dried on her arms and face made her appear even more fragile. Yet her eyes burned with determination. She had fled from her tribe, who had been scattered after an attack by a band of hostile men. She knew she could not go back. They would be gone, either dead or hiding in places she could not reach. The desert, though cruel, offered her a chance to survive if she could only keep moving. She leaned on a jagged rock to catch her breath, pressing a trembling hand against the wound in her side. Every heartbeat ached, but she refused to collapse. She thought of the children, the young ones in her tribe who might be left unprotected. She remembered their laughter, their small hands gripping hers when fear had touched their eyes. That memory gave her the strength to rise again, even when her legs threatened to buckle. She moved slowly, each step a struggle, through the endless stretches of sand, rocks, and dry bushes. The wind carried a cold bite, though the sun's heat was still strong on her face. She kept her eyes alert, watching for any movement in the distance. Every rustle of brush, every shadow that shifted unnaturally made her heart pound. She knew the land well, and she knew it could be both friend and foe. Desert snakes, coyotes, and other creatures could attack without warning, and there were humans who would kill without hesitation. It was in one such tense moment that she first saw him. A cowboy, tall and sturdy, mounted on a horse, moving steadily across the distant dunes. He carried a rifle slung over his shoulder and wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His presence was commanding and dangerous. She froze, crouching behind a small rock, barely daring to breathe. The cowboy's eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and precise, as if he could see through the desert itself. She knew instantly that he could kill her without a second thought. For a long moment, neither moved. She tried to steady her breathing, forcing herself to remain calm, but her body ached and her mind raced. She considered hiding, crawling further into the rocks and sand, but she knew it would be useless. The cowboy was too skilled. He could track her like an animal, and if he chose to, there would be no escape. Yet somehow she felt that she had to speak, to plead, even if her voice trembled. When she finally found her courage, she raised a trembling hand, waving slightly as a sign of peace. Her voice, weak but steady, cut through the still air. "Please do not kill me," she said. The cowboy's eyes widened slightly as if surprised by her words. He reined in his horse and approached slowly, his steps careful, his gaze never leaving her face. She could see the lines of suspicion etched deep into his features. He was a man used to danger, used to making life-and-death decisions in a moment. "You're alone out here," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "A long way from your people. You know what happens to women who wander these lands alone." "Yes," she whispered, shifting to sit on the rock more firmly. "I know, and yet I ask for mercy. I am not a threat." Her voice faltered, and she felt the sting of tears she refused to let fall. She knew that showing weakness could be dangerous, but she also knew that honesty and courage might be her only chance. "I am wounded," she said. "I cannot fight. I only wish to live." The cowboy studied her carefully. His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, the blood, the bruises, the defiance in her gaze. There was a story in those eyes, a story of survival, of loss, of pain. He had faced many enemies in his time, men and women who had tried to deceive him, who had tried to kill him first. But something in this woman's presence was different. She did not threaten him with words or weapons. She threatened him with something else, something he could not name, perhaps the raw truth of life and death that lay so clearly on her. "You should have stayed with your tribe," he said finally. "Then you wouldn't be out here like this." She shook her head, a small movement, careful not to show too much pain. They were gone. I could not stay, and if I had, I would have died. I am not asking for much, only a moment of life." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if watching this strange meeting unfold. The cowboy's horse shifted its weight, kicking up dust, but he remained still, considering. She thought she saw a flicker of doubt cross his face. Perhaps he wondered why she was still alive, why she had dared to speak to a man who could end her life with a single shot. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke again. Her words were quiet but urgent, carrying a weight beyond her years. "If you spare me, I can help children. I can promise safety to those who would not survive otherwise. Life is not only mine to keep, it can be given back." The cowboy blinked. The idea sounded strange, almost unbelievable. Children, safety. In a land where survival often meant killing to protect oneself, the notion seemed almost foolish. And yet, the conviction in her voice made him pause. He had seen fear, he had seen courage, but he had rarely seen someone offer something so pure, so selfless in a moment when death was so near. "Children?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. "What do you mean?" "They are my people, or others who have none," she explained. "I can show you where they are, I can help them survive, but I cannot do it alone. I am wounded. I need a chance." The cowboy considered her words. He was a man of few attachments, a man hardened by the harshness of the land, but he felt a strange stirring within him. He had killed and survived, yes, but he had rarely faced someone whose very life seemed to challenge him in ways that no fight or ambush ever had. He wondered what would happen if he ignored her plea. If he let her die here alone, the desert would take her as it had taken so many others before. And yet, if he helped her, if he spared her life, what might follow? The woman's eyes never left his. They were fierce yet weary, filled with a mixture of pain, hope, and determination. She did not plead with tears, nor did she beg for sympathy. She offered him a promise, a bond he could not yet understand. The wind picked up, sweeping across the dunes, and he made a decision that would change both of their lives. He lowered his rifle slightly, signaling that he would not shoot. "You get one chance," he said, his voice steady, carrying authority. "One chance to prove that you are not just words in the wind." A small spark of relief passed through her, though she remained cautious. "I will not fail," she whispered. She knew the road ahead would be perilous. She was weak, her wounds raw, and the desert offered no mercy. But somehow, in this moment, a fragile trust had been formed. A connection between two souls who had every reason to be enemies but had chosen, instead, a path of survival and possibility. As he led her slowly across the desert, supporting her weak frame, she looked ahead, her mind already planning for the challenges to come. The sun dipped lower, and shadows stretched long across the sand. The cowboy kept his eyes on the horizon, alert for danger, while the woman drew on her remaining strength, knowing that each step was a step toward life, not just hers, but for the children she had promised to protect. In that quiet, tense journey across the unforgiving desert, two strangers had begun a story of survival, courage, and unexpected trust. Neither knew where it would lead, but both understood that the desert had given them a chance, and that chance was worth everything. The desert stretched endlessly around them, a sea of sand, rocks, and scrub that seemed to go on forever. The sun had dipped lower, painting the sky with deep oranges and purples, and the air cooled, giving a small relief from the harsh heat of the day. The wounded Apache woman leaned on the cowboy as they moved slowly, her strength barely enough to keep her on her feet. Every step was painful, and yet she refused to stop. She had made a promise, one she intended to keep, and it burned in her mind like a fire that could not be quenched. The cowboy guided her carefully, his hand firm on her arm, keeping her steady. He had seen many people struggle in the desert, many who had begged for mercy and ultimately fallen. But this woman was different. Her eyes, though tired and filled with pain, held a determination that he could not ignore. There was a sharpness in her mind, a focus that came not from fear, but from purpose. He could see it in the way she scanned the horizon, alert for danger, and the way she carefully chose her steps, as if she understood the land better than anyone he had ever met. They reached a small ravine as the sky darkened, a place that offered a bit of shelter from the wind and a chance to rest. The cowboy helped her sit down on a flat rock, and she sank gratefully, her body trembling from exhaustion. He unpacked a small bag of supplies from his horse, a canteen of water, some dried meat, and a rough blanket. He offered the water first, and she drank slowly, savoring every drop. "I don't know how far you've come," he said, breaking the silence, "but you look like you've been through hell." "I have," she whispered, her voice low but steady. "I have lost much. My tribe, my family, many are gone." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "I am all that remains, and I cannot abandon those who are left, especially the children." The cowboy frowned slightly. "Children?" he repeated, his voice cautious. "You mean your own?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not only mine, some are orphans. Some are from families who were lost in the raids. If I do not protect them, they will die. The desert does not forgive, and the people who should care for them are gone." Her eyes, dark and deep, met his. "I can save them. I know where they are hiding, but I cannot do it alone. I am wounded. I need your help." The cowboy studied her silently for a long moment. He was a man of the wilds, used to danger, used to trusting no one, and yet there was something about her words that struck a chord. He had seen enough death to know how fragile life was, and he had seen enough courage to know when it came from truth. There was honesty in her voice, a fire that refused to die despite all she had endured. "And what's in it for me?" he asked finally, a hint of dry humor in his tone, though his eyes remained watchful. "Why should I risk my life for strangers who might be nothing but trouble?" The woman's lips curved faintly, the first sign of a smile since he had found her. "Because," she said slowly, "sometimes doing the right thing is worth more than gold or safety. Sometimes saving life is the only thing that makes any sense." She coughed, grimacing as pain shot through her side, but she refused to show weakness. "And because you, too, are a man who knows the land, you can help me. Together, we can keep them safe." The cowboy remained silent for a long moment. He had heard many promises before, most of them empty, spoken by those who were desperate. But there was something about this woman, her determination, her clarity, that made him pause. Perhaps it was her courage, or perhaps it was the fire in her eyes. Either way, he felt a tug of respect for her, an unfamiliar feeling he had not experienced in years. "All right," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "I'll help you, but understand this. If you lie to me, if this is some trick, you will regret it." "I swear," she said, lifting her hand as if to seal her promise. "I swear on my life, I will not fail." That night, as the stars appeared above the desert sky, they made a small camp in the ravine. The cowboy tended to her wounds as best as he could, cleaning them carefully and bandaging them with strips of cloth torn from his own shirt. The woman watched him work silently, her eyes reflecting the flickering light of the small fire he had made. She was grateful, yet she refused to show weakness. Her pride, even in such dire circumstances, remained intact. Once he finished, he handed her some dried meat and water. She ate slowly, savoring the small nourishment. The cowboy watched her carefully, noting her strength despite her injuries. He had seen many people in his time, but few had the courage to endure what she had. "You have been through much," he said quietly, "and yet you keep going." "Why? Because I must," she said simply. "Because those who cannot protect themselves need someone to stand for them. I cannot abandon them, not now, not ever. Life is cruel, yes, but we can still choose to protect what is innocent." Her voice, though low, carried an undeniable strength. The cowboy nodded, his gaze drifting to the fire. He had lived many years in these lands, and he had seen enough cruelty to fill a lifetime. Yet hearing her words, seeing her courage, made him reconsider the way he viewed the world. Perhaps survival was not just about strength or skill, it was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. The next morning, they set out again. The woman's steps were slow, and the cowboy adjusted his pace to match hers, keeping her steady. She told him about the children, describing where they had hidden after the attacks on her tribe. She spoke of secret paths, of small creeks and caves where the young ones could hide, and of her hopes to lead them to safety. As they traveled, he realized how much she knew about the land. She could read the signs of animals, know where water might be found, and sense danger long before it arrived. He had thought he was skilled, but she seemed to possess an instinct deeper than knowledge, something almost sacred. It was clear to him that she had survived not just because of courage, but because of wisdom and understanding that came from a lifetime of living close to the land. By midday, they reached a small hidden spring, a place where water bubbled up between rocks, surrounded by scrub and small trees. The woman knelt by the water, washing the dust and blood from her hands and face. The cowboy watched her silently, feeling a strange respect growing for this woman who had faced death so fearlessly. "You really think you can save them?" he asked cautiously. "I know I can," she said firmly, her eyes meeting his, "but I cannot do it alone. I need someone who can fight, someone who knows the land, someone who will stand with me when the danger comes. That is why I asked for your help." He studied her face, the determination in her eyes, and realized that he could not turn back. He had seen too much to ignore courage when it stood before him. He had fought many battles, killed many men, and survived impossible odds. But this was different. This was about trust, about promises, about something greater than himself. And for the first time in many years, he felt a purpose beyond survival. They rested by the spring for a while, drinking water and sharing what little food they had. The woman began to explain more about her tribe, the customs, the way of life they had before the attacks, and how she hoped to protect the next generation. The cowboy listened silently, realizing how much life had been destroyed by conflict, and how rare it was to find someone willing to risk everything for others. As the day faded, the woman prepared to move again. Her wounds slowed her, but her determination never wavered. The cowboy helped her to her feet, and together they set off into the desert, following the hidden paths she knew so well. Each step was a challenge, yet each step brought them closer to the children she had promised to protect. Through these long hours, a fragile bond began to grow between them. It was not friendship, not yet, but something equally powerful, mutual respect and understanding, forged in the harshness of the desert and the immediacy of survival. They were bound together by necessity, by promise, and by the unspoken recognition that in a world filled with danger, they could rely on each other, even if only for this moment. As night fell again, they found a small canyon to shelter in, hidden from the path of travelers. The woman settled against a rock, exhausted but resolute. The cowboy built a small fire and they sat in silence for a long time, listening to the sounds of the desert night, the rustle of small creatures, the whisper of the wind through the rocks, the distant cry of an owl. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but determined. "Tomorrow we reach the children. I know the way. I have led them before and I can do it again, but we must be careful. Others may be looking for them or for me." The cowboy nodded. "Then we move at first light," he said. "And I'll make sure no harm comes to them, or to you." She smiled faintly, a small gesture, but it carried more relief than words could express. In that moment, for the first time since she had been wounded and left alone, she felt hope. Hope not just for herself, but for the children who had no one else to protect them. Hope that perhaps, in a world so harsh, promises could still be kept, courage could still be rewarded, and life could still be saved. The first light of dawn spilled over the desert, painting the rocks and sand in pale gold. The Apache woman stirred, wincing as a sharp pain shot through her side. The cowboy was already awake, quietly checking their small camp and scanning the horizon. He had learned to trust the desert's silence, knowing that danger often came without warning. Today, they would reach the children, and the thought filled him with a strange mixture of anticipation and caution. He had been through countless confrontations, but this journey was unlike any other. It was not just about survival, it was about protection, trust, and keeping a promise. The woman leaned heavily on him as they began to move, each step slow but deliberate. The desert, which had seemed endless before, now felt like a labyrinth of challenges. Sharp rocks threatened to tear her clothes further, loose sand made each step a struggle, and the sun climbed steadily, promising a long, hot day. Yet her spirit remained unbroken. She had led people through worse conditions before, and she would do so again. She thought of the children hidden in small crevices and caves, waiting for someone brave enough to come to them. Her heart ached for them, but it also filled with determination. The cowboy kept a close eye on her, guiding her around jagged rocks and helping her over rough terrain. As they walked, she began to share more about the children, describing them one by one. There was a small boy who loved to imitate the elders' hunting techniques, a girl who could weave baskets with astonishing skill, and several toddlers who had barely begun to understand the harshness of the world around them. She told the cowboy about their fears, their hopes, and their laughter, the laughter she had worked so hard to protect from disappearing. "You really care for them," the cowboy said quietly, watching her carefully, "even more than for yourself." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips despite the pain. "They are the future. If they are not safe, then all we have fought for, all we have survived, means nothing. I cannot allow that. I must keep my promise." They traveled in silence for a while after that, each lost in their thoughts. The desert around them seemed endless, a challenge in itself. The sun climbed higher and the air grew thick with heat. Sweat ran down their faces, and the woman's wounds throbbed painfully, but she did not complain. She moved with a rhythm she had learned from years of survival, careful to conserve energy while keeping a steady pace. The cowboy followed her lead, respecting her knowledge and skill. He realized that though he had survived many battles, he had much to learn from her about endurance, patience, and courage. As midday approached, the landscape changed slightly. Small shrubs gave way to scattered trees and a narrow path led toward a hidden canyon. The woman's eyes brightened and she pointed toward the canyon. "The children are close," she whispered. "We must be careful, others may be watching. There are people who would take advantage if they find them alone." The cowboy nodded. Danger was never far in these lands. Bandits, rival groups, and others with ill intent could appear without warning. He tightened his grip on his rifle, ready for anything. Together, they approached the entrance to the canyon slowly, moving quietly and keeping low to avoid being seen. The woman led the way, her knowledge of the terrain invaluable. She could sense the presence of others from subtle signs, footprints in the sand, broken twigs, and the faintest traces of smoke. Inside the canyon, the temperature dropped slightly, and the shade offered some relief from the sun. The walls rose steep and jagged around them, providing both protection and the risk of ambush. The woman paused, crouching behind a rock and scanning the area. "They are close," she said again. "A small group hidden near a creek. If we move carefully, we can reach them without being seen." The cowboy nodded, impressed by her precision and focus. He had faced many ambushes in his life, yet this methodical, careful approach was different. It was not just skill, it was instinct, experience, and love combined. He realized that saving these children was more than a task. It was a mission that demanded everything from both of them. They crept through the canyon, using every shadow and every rock as cover. Occasionally, the woman would stop and point out subtle clues that guided their path. The faint mark of a foot, a disturbed bush, a small piece of cloth caught on a branch. Each detail mattered. Finally, they reached a small clearing near the creek. Hidden among the rocks and trees were the children, small and wary but alive. The woman's face softened and she motioned for the cowboy to stay back. She approached the children slowly, speaking softly, her voice carrying warmth and reassurance. "It's all right," she whispered. "You are safe. I am here. You will not be harmed." The children's eyes widened as they recognized her, and relief washed over their faces. Some ran to her, clutching her hands, while others stayed back, cautious but curious. The cowboy watched silently, moved by the scene. The woman knelt among them, checking that each child was safe and unharmed. She spoke quietly to them, encouraging them to remain calm and explaining that they must be careful while they move to a safer place. Her care and attention were precise, each word chosen to soothe and guide. The cowboy felt admiration and respect growing inside him. He had fought and survived in harsh lands, but he had rarely witnessed such courage, patience, and devotion. As they prepared to leave, a sudden sound broke the calm, a distant shout followed by the crunch of boots on rocks. The woman froze, her eyes narrowing. "They are coming," she whispered urgently. "We must move quickly or we will be trapped." The cowboy grabbed his rifle and positioned himself between the approaching danger and the children. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, but this time it was different. This was not just about survival for himself. It was about protecting innocent lives. The children huddled close to the woman, trusting her completely. She turned to the cowboy, her eyes steady. "We must fight together," she said simply. The first of the bandits appeared at the edge of the clearing, unaware of the two adults and the children hidden among the rocks. The cowboy moved quickly, taking careful aim and firing to drive them back. The woman, though still wounded, was agile and precise. She used rocks and the terrain to her advantage, distracting and confusing the attackers, allowing the children to move further into the canyon safely. The fight was tense but brief. The attackers, realizing that they had underestimated their opponents, retreated. The cowboy and the woman remained vigilant, scanning the canyon for any sign of further danger. The children clung to the woman, frightened but unharmed. Relief washed over her, though her exhaustion was evident. She knew they had survived one threat, but the journey was not over. Once the immediate danger had passed, the cowboy and the woman led the children along a hidden path toward a safer area. The creek provided fresh water, and the canyon walls offered protection. The woman's knowledge of the land was crucial, guiding them around dangerous terrain and away from potential threats. The children followed closely, trusting completely in her and the cowboy. Throughout the journey, the cowboy and the woman worked as a team. He provided strength and protection. She provided knowledge and guidance. Together, they navigated the desert's challenges, moving steadily toward safety. Along the way, the woman told the children stories to calm their fears, teaching them about the land and the importance of courage and resilience. The cowboy listened silently, realizing that their efforts were not just about survival, but about giving these children a chance at life and hope. By evening, they reached a hidden cave, a place the woman had prepared as a temporary refuge. The children settled in, exhausted but safe. The woman checked each child carefully, ensuring that they had water and food. The cowboy set up a small fire, keeping watch for any signs of danger. In the quiet of the canyon, there was a moment of peace, a brief respite in a world filled with challenges. The woman turned to the cowboy, her expression tired but resolute. "We have kept them safe for now," she said. "But the journey is not over. Others may come. We must be ready to protect them until they are truly safe." The cowboy nodded, his respect for her growing with every passing moment. He had learned much from her courage, wisdom, and determination. He realized that life was not just about surviving the harshness of the desert. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves and keeping promises, no matter the cost. As night fell, they sat together by the fire, the children sleeping safely nearby. The desert was quiet, except for the rustle of small creatures and the whisper of the wind through the canyon. The woman leaned back against a rock, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The cowboy kept his watch, alert but thoughtful. They had survived the dangers of the day, but they both knew that more challenges lay ahead. In that moment, the bond between the two grown stronger. It was a bond forged in adversity, trust, and a shared mission. They were no longer just a wounded woman and a skilled cowboy. They were protectors, allies, and partners in a journey that was about far more than survival. They were carrying hope, courage, and life itself through the unforgiving desert. The desert morning came quietly, but the peace was only temporary. The Apache woman had barely rested when the wind carried the faint sound of voices and the crunch of boots on rock. She froze, her body tense, and her eyes scanned the canyon walls. The cowboy, already alert, raised a hand, signaling her to remain still. Danger had found them once again. "They're back," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. "We must move quickly. If they find us here, the children will be in danger." The cowboy nodded, keeping his rifle ready. He had fought many battles in his life, but this was different. These were not just strangers seeking wealth or revenge. They were people who would harm innocent children without hesitation. He looked at the children, huddled together near the rocks, and felt a determination stronger than any he had known before. He would protect them whatever the cost. The woman moved swiftly among the children, calming them and preparing them for movement. "Stay close to me," she whispered. "Do not speak unless I tell you. We must be silent, and we must be quick." Her experience in the wilds gave her an almost instinctive sense of danger. She led the group through hidden paths along the canyon, using her knowledge of the land to avoid open spaces where they could be spotted. The approaching group grew louder, their shouts echoing through the canyon walls. The cowboy and the woman exchanged a brief glance. Without words, they understood each other perfectly. He would cover their rear, keeping watch for any attempt to follow, while she led the children forward, guiding them to safety. The children, sensing the seriousness of the situation, followed quietly, their small feet careful on the uneven ground. As they moved, the woman whispered instructions to the cowboy. "There's a narrow passage ahead. We can hide there if they come too close, but we must not stop until we reach it." He nodded, adjusting his pace to ensure the children remained safe. The desert had become a battlefield, not of armies, but of survival, courage, and trust. Every step they took was a balance between speed and caution. The children were frightened, but they trusted the woman completely. They had seen her face danger, navigate the desert, and protect them without hesitation. Her courage was a shield for them, and her calm voice guided them through the fear. The cowboy marveled at her strength, realizing that she possessed something far greater than physical skill, an unshakable spirit that could inspire even the most desperate hearts. Suddenly, one of the children stumbled on a loose rock. A sharp cry escaped, and the approaching group's heads turned toward the sound. The woman reacted instantly, crouching and pulling the child close to her, covering them with her body. The cowboy raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the canyon, startling the attackers and giving the woman precious seconds to move the children toward the narrow passage she had spotted. The attackers hesitated, momentarily confused by the sudden noise and the woman's audacity. The cowboy fired again, aiming carefully to drive them back without unnecessary harm. The woman's heart pounded, but she remained calm, guiding the children through the passage. Her knowledge of the canyon's twists and turns allowed them to escape sight, moving into a small hidden alcove far enough from the approaching danger. Once the group was safely hidden, the woman turned to the cowboy. "They may come closer," she said. "We must be ready." She glanced at the children who were huddled silently, their wide eyes reflecting fear and trust. "Do not let them see us," she whispered. "We cannot fight them all. We must wait for the right moment." The cowboy nodded, understanding the strategy. He had learned long ago that brute force alone was rarely enough. Strategy, patience, and the right timing often made the difference between life and death. He positioned himself at a vantage point, watching the canyon entrance, while the woman prepared the children for the possibility of confrontation. She moved among them quietly, checking that they were calm, that they understood her instructions, and that they trusted her completely. The attackers grew bolder, moving closer to the hidden passage. Their voices carried over the canyon, filled with threats and harsh words. The cowboy's eyes narrowed as he calculated the best way to protect the group. The woman whispered to him, outlining a plan that relied on their knowledge of the terrain and their ability to remain unseen until the attackers made a mistake. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional sound of wind or distant animal. The woman kept the children close, whispering stories and instructions to distract them from fear. The cowboy remained vigilant, watching every movement, every shadow, ready to act at a moment's notice. The desert had become a test of endurance, courage, and intelligence, and both the woman and the cowboy knew that any misstep could be fatal. Finally, the attackers grew reckless, moving too close to the hidden passage. The woman gave a subtle signal to the cowboy. He rose quietly, taking careful aim and firing a series of warning shots to create confusion. Rocks dislodged and fell, startling the attackers and causing them to scatter in different directions. The woman seized the moment, leading the children further into the canyon, toward a safer location she had prepared in advance. The children followed her without hesitation, their trust in her absolute. They had seen her face danger, survive it, and protect them against all odds. Their small hands clung to hers as she guided them, moving swiftly but carefully. The cowboy followed, keeping a watchful eye on the retreating attackers and ensuring that no one was left behind. By late afternoon, they reached a hidden grove far from the canyon entrance. A small creek ran through it, providing water, and the dense trees and rocks offered protection and concealment. The woman allowed the children to rest, giving them water and a small amount of food she had carried. She checked their wounds and comforted those who were frightened. The cowboy watched silently, impressed by her unwavering dedication and courage. "They are safe for now," she said softly, though her eyes remained vigilant. "But we cannot stay here too long. Others may come looking." The cowboy nodded, realizing that the journey was far from over. He had fought many battles, but this was different. These children were innocent, defenseless, and entirely dependent on their protection. He felt a fierce determination growing inside him, a promise to keep them safe no matter what obstacles lay ahead. As evening fell, the woman and the cowboy sat quietly by the creek, listening to the sounds of the desert. The children slept peacefully, finally relaxed in the safety of the grove. The woman allowed herself a moment of rest, leaning against a tree and closing her eyes briefly. Her body ached, her wounds throbbed, but she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the children were safe. The cowboy, sitting nearby, kept watch, his mind alert but thoughtful. He had come across many dangers in his life, but he had rarely encountered someone like the Apache woman. Her courage, wisdom, and selflessness were extraordinary. He realized that he had not only learned to trust her, but had come to respect and admire her in ways he had never experienced before. Night fell fully, and the desert became quiet except for the occasional rustle of wildlife. The woman whispered to the cowboy about the next steps, planning the journey ahead to ensure the children reached a safer place far from the desert's dangers. They discussed strategies, routes, and the importance of remaining unseen. The cowboy listened attentively, knowing that her knowledge and instincts were invaluable. As they prepared to rest, the woman looked at the children sleeping nearby. Her eyes softened, filled with hope and determination. "We will protect them," she whispered. "No matter what comes, they will survive." The cowboy nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had made many choices in his life, some wise, some regrettable, but this, protecting the innocent, keeping a promise, was a choice he could be proud of. Together they had faced danger, outwitted their enemies, and ensured the safety of those who could not defend themselves. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in trust, courage, and the shared mission of survival. In the quiet of the night, the desert seemed less harsh, the wind gentler and the stars brighter. For the first time in many days, there was a sense of hope. The Apache woman, the cowboy, and the children had survived another trial, proving that courage, intelligence, and trust could overcome even the greatest dangers. And though the journey was far from over, they had learned that together, they could face anything the desert and the world threw at them. They were not just survivors. They were protectors, bonded by promise and purpose, ready to face the challenges yet to come. The sun rose slowly over the desert, spilling golden light across the rugged landscape. The Apache woman stirred first, carefully checking the children as they slept. Their small faces were peaceful, untroubled by the dangers of the past days, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small smile. She had led them through countless perils, kept them safe from those who sought to harm them, and now, the final part of her journey to secure their safety had come. The cowboy was already awake, sharpening the edge of his knife and scanning the surrounding canyon for any signs of trouble. The night had been quiet, but he knew that peace in the desert was often temporary. He had learned to trust the Apache woman's instincts, and as he looked at her moving quietly among the children, he felt a profound respect for her courage, patience, and determination. The bond between them had grown strong, built not only on survival but on trust, respect, and shared purpose. The woman gathered the children and spoke quietly, her voice steady but gentle. "We must move today," she said. "There is a place where you will be safe. It is hidden from those who wish to do you harm, and there you can live without fear." The children listened carefully, trusting her completely. They had followed her through deserts, hidden paths, and dangerous encounters, and their faith in her was unshakable. As they set out, the cowboy took the rear, keeping watch for danger, while the woman led the way. The path was treacherous, rocky, and uneven, but her knowledge of the land guided them safely. She moved with purpose, her strength and endurance remarkable despite the injuries she still carried. Every step was a test of willpower, but she focused on the children, on the promise she had made, and on the future she was determined to protect. Along the way, she spoke softly to the children, teaching them about the land, the importance of courage, and how to stay safe. "The desert can be harsh," she said, "but it is also full of life. You must be careful, but you can also learn from it. The land is not your enemy. It can be your guide, your protector, if you know how to respect it." The children listened intently, absorbing her words, their trust in her growing with every step. The cowboy observed silently, impressed by her patience and wisdom. He had spent years in the wilderness, yet he realized that he had learned as much from her in the past few days as he had in his entire life. Her knowledge of survival, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and her unwavering focus on protecting the children were extraordinary. He knew that without her guidance, the journey would have been impossible. As they climbed higher into the rocky hills, the signs of civilization appeared faintly in the distance, small farms and settlements that promised safety and shelter. The woman guided the children carefully, avoiding main roads and populated areas where danger could still lurk. She chose hidden paths, natural cover, and narrow trails that kept them out of sight. Each choice was deliberate, each movement calculated to protect those who depended on her. Hours passed, the sun climbed high, and the desert heat pressed down on them. The children grew tired, their small feet sore from the long journey, but the woman encouraged them, offering water and gentle words of reassurance. "Almost there," she whispered. "A little further and you will be safe. Keep moving and stay close to me." The cowboy followed closely, his eyes scanning every movement, ready to defend them at a moment's notice. At last, they reached a secluded valley, hidden by high cliffs and dense vegetation. A small stream ran through the center, and a cluster of abandoned cabins provided shelter from the elements. The woman's eyes brightened as she surveyed the area. "This is it," she said. "Here, you will be safe. No one will find you here, and you can begin again." The children cheered quietly, their joy tempered by exhaustion but glowing with relief. The woman led them to the cabins, checking each one carefully and making sure the surroundings were secure. She showed the children where to gather water, how to find safe food, and where to rest. "This will be your new home for now," she said. "You will have safety here. Remember what I taught you about courage, about trust, and about protecting each other." The children listened, their eyes wide with hope and gratitude. The cowboy helped secure the area, building small barriers and making sure the cabins were defensible. Though he had never cared for children before in his life, he felt a fierce protective instinct growing within him. These children had survived so much already, and he knew that they deserved a future filled with safety, warmth, and hope. He had fought many battles, but none had felt as meaningful as this one. As the day drew to a close, the woman sat quietly with the children, telling them stories of their ancestors, of the land, and of courage. She spoke of challenges faced and overcome, of promises kept, and of the importance of hope. The children listened, captivated by her words, and their laughter began to fill the valley, soft and bright against the harshness of the world outside. The cowboy watched from a distance, a rare smile on his face. He had never imagined that he would find purpose in protecting others, that he would witness such courage and resilience, or that he would feel the warmth of hope again. The bond between him and the woman was unspoken but strong, built on shared danger, trust, and the unwavering determination to protect innocent lives. As night fell, the desert sky filled with stars, and a cool breeze rustled through the trees. The woman and the cowboy stood together, watching the children settle down to rest. She turned to him, her face weary but serene. "We did it," she said quietly. "They are safe now. The promise is kept." The cowboy nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. "Yes," he said, "you kept your word. And so did I. They are safe because we worked together, because we trusted each other, and because we refused to give up." His voice carried pride, respect, and a hint of emotion he rarely expressed. For a moment they stood in silence, listening to the gentle sounds of the valley, the soft murmur of the stream, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the occasional call of a distant bird. The desert, which had been so harsh and unforgiving, seemed at peace, as if acknowledging the courage and determination of those who had faced it and survived. The woman knelt beside the children, brushing the dirt from their clothes and checking that each one was comfortable. She smiled softly, her heart full of relief and hope. "You are strong," she whispered to them. "You have survived, and now you can live. Remember the lessons we have learned, and you will be safe." The cowboy approached, standing behind her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder in a gesture of respect and solidarity. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "I have never seen anyone with your courage, your patience, and your wisdom. You have saved them all." The woman looked up at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and trust. "We saved them," she said softly, "together. This was not my journey alone. Your courage and your help made all the difference. I could not have done it without you." The cowboy smiled faintly, feeling a rare warmth in his chest. He had faced many dangers in his life, but he had never experienced a bond like this one. It was not love in the traditional sense, but a deep connection forged through trust, shared purpose, and the fight to protect life. He realized that some of the greatest victories were not measured by wealth or power, but by the lives saved and the promises kept. The children began to settle for the night, their small voices hushed but filled with contentment. The woman stayed close to them, her presence a constant reassurance. The cowboy kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkened valley, ensuring that nothing would disturb their safety. The night was calm, the air filled with the quiet strength of survival, courage, and hope. As they sat together, the woman and the cowboy reflected on their journey. They had faced danger, hardship, and uncertainty, yet they had emerged victorious. The children were safe, and the promise had been fulfilled. They had learned the power of trust, courage, and determination, and they had discovered that even in the harshest lands, hope could survive. Finally, as the stars shone brightly above, the woman allowed herself to rest, leaning against a rock with a sense of peace. The cowboy stood nearby, vigilant yet calm, knowing that their mission was complete. They had kept their promise, protected the innocent, and survived the desert's trials together. And in that quiet, star-filled night, the Apache woman, the cowboy, and the children had found something more than survival. They had found trust, courage, and the knowledge that even in a world full of danger, life could be preserved, promises could be kept, and hope could endure. The desert had tested them, shaped them, and challenged them in every way, but they had triumphed not through strength alone, but through compassion, courage, and unwavering determination. The children would live, the promise had been kept, and the bond between the two unlikely allies would remain a testament to the power of trust, humanity, and hope.